Good afternoon. Oh, no, it's good morning still. I barely know what day it is. Thank you so much for joining us here at the, do we call it the UK Film Centre? It's the Screen UK Centre this year. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm a journalist and film festival programmer, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this session. I think it's a really great topic to talk about because it's about not just the UK, but the UK to the world. So I think we're going to have a great discussion. We are also going to describe ourselves visually in case there's any visually impaired people either in the room or watching on the catch-up video later. So I am a blonde woman with spectacles, a tired face, and an overly bright necklace. So let's introduce our speakers. Let's start at the far end down there. We have Fabian Westerhoff, who is CEO of Film Constellation. They are in Cannes this year with IFAS and Animal. I might have mispronounced those. Some of their recent UK titles include The Lesson, Blue Jean, Been So Long, Run. And before Fabian set up Film Constellation in 2016, he worked at Hanway at West End at co-production office. So very internationally experienced as well. Fabian, can you tell us your visual appearance, please?
Hi, good morning. I am a male, blonde, wearing a white shirt and jeans.
Great. Next to Fabian is Stefano Massenzi. He is partner and head of acquisitions and business affairs at Lucky Red. And I'm sure most of you, I hope most of you know Lucky Red, one of these top indie distributors and producers in Italy. And he has been with the company since 2000. Some of their past British releases include Slumdog Millionaire, Sorry We Missed You, Philomena, Bend It Like Beckham, and Scrapper they're going to release soon, and we'll talk about some more. So, Stefano, can you describe yourself?
Okay, male, not a lot of hair. It used to be brown. It's my eyes.
Okay, thank you. Then we have Sarah Mosses, who is CEO of Together Films, which is a company that does marketing and sales and impact work. They have offices in the UK and the US. And some of the great films she has worked on include For Sama, Your Fat Friend recently, and Camera. So a real range of titles. Sarah, do you want to add anything? And can you describe yourself?
Yeah, so we focus on impact. That's our niche. I am a fake blonde woman sat on the panel wearing a very bright flowery dress and some pink shoes.
Thank you. Last but not least, we have Stephan De Potter, who is co-CEO of Cineart in Benelux. Again, one of the stalwarts of European film. The company has been around since 1975. He's been there since 97. Is that right? Yes, nice. Many British films on their slate in the past have included The Selfish Giant, I, Daniel Blake, Zone of Interest, and he has already pre-bought Andrea Arnold's Bird, as has Lucky Red. So, some British film fans in the house. So, let's get right into it. Sarah and Fabian, I wanted to come to you first because obviously you work in impact with you, Sarah, and sales, and you don't just work with British films. So what would you say is the market? Are people drawn to British films? Are buyers looking for British films? Are they a challenge to sell British films? Or is it just a film by film basis and you can't really say this works because it's British or not? Sarah, do you want to start with that?
Sure, I'll start there. So I think there's definitely an international interest in British new talent. We have really incredible creators that come through. But the idea of it just being British, being the selling point, I think is a naive assumption when you go out into the market. We focus on films on kind of different impact levels. So it might be representation, women's rights, environment issues. So what we're recommending to our UK producers is like, is this an issue that can travel well, that has global resonance? So you being a UK creative, it gives you a mark of sort of usually kind of quality coming from the region we're coming from, but I'm looking at those issues where can this issue of kind of women's rights resonate in other territories, and are other countries going to be passionate about those themes and not being too inwardly UK centric? I think it's an important point. So that's probably my first response to that. Vivian?
Yeah, there's such a history of great British film talent that among the film producing nations, Britain shines bright, and with that legacy and track record, people are of course always on the lookout for the next new British talent. And then, the very established filmmakers coming from out of the UK that regularly shine on the international festival scene. And we would just mention Andrea Arnold, that has her latest film here. And obviously these filmmakers are very established, but they continue to confirm and establish the, British culture and film at a very high level. And ideally it's, you have a country that does both, has legacy stalwart directors that consistently deliver a film every couple of years that will be at A-class film festivals, and simultaneously, brings a new generation of younger filmmakers with debut films and in official selections in key festivals. So a healthy, production nation has a bit of both.
And does it feel healthy right now on both respects?
Yeah, I think the independent film is always a struggle, and by nature, if you are a debut filmmaker, there's a shared struggle of how do you stand out, and you do have the benefit in the UK of sharing the most widely spoken language globally, and so that is definitely a big advantage compared to any other nation. And then, the UK is consistently, delivering one of the greatest pool of acting talents and some of the best trained actors globally. So that's something, again, that is something wonderful you can tap into. And then there's the institutional support that is offered in the UK, and which is limited, and there could be more. But that's, the infrastructure is there to find ways to have your project, be seen and get exposed in a way that helps you move forward. So I think the UK has a good setup.
Okay. Can I ask again with Fabian and Sarah? Are there certain territories that seem more keen on British films than others? Our friends in continental Europe. A lot of UK films still tend to do well there, I hope. I don't know how many films can sell into China, or, is the Indian market taking British films, or where do you see bright spots to sell British films?
Yeah, historically, there's when we talk about British films, I think maybe we're talking about independent film here.
Yes, not Harry Potter.
Yeah, compared to studio movies. So you have the key Western markets, and in Europe, that's Germany, that's France, and that's Spain and Scandinavia, and Poland. Are healthy, mature cinephile countries that are always on the lookout for great British films. And then the US market, which of course, the bridge is very much there. And for any breakout talent, the opportunity to get wider distribution in the US is something that is, where you uniquely positioned for. And China is a market that by nature is not a free market.
No.
And so
it's still got quotas about how many Chinese films. Yeah.
Any independent film will face the same challenges to penetrate that market. Yeah.
We look at it in a slightly different manner as well, because we have a hybrid business model. It's both a sales agency and an impact campaign team. So we're looking at where in the world does it need to be seen, as opposed to where is just the commercial interest, which is a different look on it. So we're actually looking at audience profiling data of where does a particular theme have resonance with local community, and therefore using that information to encourage commercial buyers in that region to take it. And then if there isn't a buyer in that region that sort of naturally sees the commercial intent, we will actually then work out what is the direct distribution methodology in that territory, because the issue has real resonance there. So we have this in a number of titles where if we don't have a big North American offer that we're really passionate about, we will just put that into cinemas ourselves. We'll do kind of digital in that region. Especially we have a hybrid slate of documentaries and scripted. For those that we know are going to be kind of an awards front runner, we'll do the qualifying run. So we're sort of approaching it on two different lenses. What's the innate sort of commercial interest in that title from distributors? And if we don't get a territory kind of offer that comes comes in, what is the way that we can cultivate that directly with audiences, because that issue needs to be talked about in that particular country. So, and the way that we approach that, as we've said, there's some funding available, which is great, but there's not huge amounts of funding to help that distribution. But we look at alternative sources of funding to help that. So,
like NGOs or partners like that.
So part of our team is we apply to a number of kind of big foundations or philanthropists to bankroll that P&A spend. So when we're going direct to market in a territory, we're having that subsidized by non-recoupable funders. So it's effectively like if we can't get someone to take the commercial risk from a distribution landscape, we can take that risk, but we actually get it usually 100% backed by a foundation partner. And we're actually looking at offering that up to some of our distribution partners in the future, where if we don't get something like a BFI Global Screen Fund P&A support, we can say, actually, well, X Foundation gave us this grant, we could gift you 10 grand towards your P&A if you take the risk of releasing it. And that's a model that we want to cultivate further, because the financing model for documentary is similar but actually quite different in this kind of indie space. And there are non-recoupable funds around that can do that, and we'll be announcing something in that vein at Sheffield Doc Fest for the first time. So stand by for that announcement.
Wonderful. Let's come to our distributors, our guest countries. Stefan, can I start with you? And just, I would mention that you pre-bought Andrea Arnold's Bird. Have you released all of Andrea's films?
Yeah, actually, yes. We discovered here in competition with Red Road.
Oh, yeah.
A long time ago. And we picked up that movie at that time. And at Cineart, we like to keep the artists and the directors that we discovered as long as we can. And that's so she's actually, yes, part of the team, of the cinema team, of the family, of the Cineart family. Like Ken Loge is a long companion with Cineart as well. Yeah.
Okay. And with that, do her films consistently perform well in the Benelux? Is it film by film? How do you think Bird will do? Because it's slightly different for her.
It's slightly different, but
it's still Andrea Arnold universe, isn't it?
Andrea Arnold with sometimes the best of what she's did before, but with, of course, with the change. So I think the audience recognizes her style, and is also familiar with that style. It doesn't mean that it's going to be huge numbers. Well, we hope so, but I mean, you have to be realistic. So yes, it helps us, probably working on the audience and bringing an author that has been discovered, has been, curated through us. And so that's the whole idea of us discovering a new talent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And does somebody like Barry Keoghan in her film help maybe reach a further audience, or I mean, we have to wait and see. I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But it's always I tend to think that we are really restricted to or dedicated to directors and authors, and having a big star in an auteur film helps, but not always. Yeah. And it's still what we work on is the auteur and the director, not really. I mean, when we released Deux Jours Une Nuit with Marion Cotillard, of course we focused on the Dardennes and not on Marion Cotillard. Yeah. Sorry to mention a non-UK film.
It's okay. It's allowed. And what about at Lucky Red, Stefano? Had you worked with Andrea Arnold on most of her films?
No, this is the first time.
Oh, okay.
First time.
Why now?
Because we've always liked her work, and we thought that she was an author that deserved more. And recently, I mean, in our history, we've always we were born as arthouse and prestige distributors, and more and more the audience is going that way, luckily, which is good news. And we are curating, we've always been curating our authors, but with less faithfulness than in Belgium, because Italy is a bigger country, so of course the MGs and the P&As are much higher, so you have to judge the film and the potential of the film. And so we identified Andrea's work as a work that could be, needed a better handling. Yes. And so that was one of the push.
Okay.
To
On behalf of Britain, thank you for giving Andrea an extra
You're
push
very well.
in Italy. What about, as we were mentioning, new talents? Like you
Yes.
mentioned, you're going to be releasing Charlotte Reagan's Scrapper
Yes.
soon, and it's a wonderful debut. Where did you discover that? I assume you didn't pre-buy that, and sort of
No,
why? What struck you about that film that you wanted it?
Listen, the reality, and I'll be extremely obvious here, is that we buy a film because we love it, because we like it, because we believe there is a potential, but also because we believe there is an author and there is a good story to be told for our audience. British films have always been successful in Italy, also because of the work of independent distributors they have done throughout the last 40 years. And the other extremely interesting aspect of our country is that we dub.
Yeah.
And this is an instrument of, I always say it's an instrument of democracy, because it cuts that distance of the language between the audience and the film. I can be criticized for this, especially by the pure. Personally, I always see original versions, but it is true that the Americans first, after the war, understood this and invaded every single market through dubbing. So British films have always been very successful in our country. Why? Because we dub. And so it's not an art house, it's not niche. It can
Do you
become
release both versions?
We do.
Okay.
Because now, again, thanks to the platforms, especially younger audiences appreciate the original version, and they're coming. And so before it was just like Rome, Milan would do one print for 1 or 2 days here and there. Now Bologna, Florence, Rome, Milan, Naples. There's a large number of original prints that show the film every single show every day, or maybe once a day. But the number of people that are going to original version films has increased. Not only British films, but across, has increased massively, I would say. And that's also good news.
Okay. Stefan, you don't dub because you'd have to dub into 3 different languages, right?
Well, actually, we dub family films.
Okay.
And we try to find a way between the Dutch and the Flemish version.
Okay.
So trying to give, space to the Netherlands and to Flanders and find a mix, a Belgian compromise, actually.
Okay. I like the compromise. Can you tell us the last time, or just a good example recently, of a British newer talent that's not an Andrea Arnold yet, that you have taken a chance on, and why that film?
Well, we bought Blue Jean from Fabian, I think 2 years ago in Venice, and just for the same reason as Stefano said, we saw the film finished, obviously in Venice, and we fell in love with the film, and we thought, okay, let's go for it. Because I think as an independent distributor, if you don't have the passion for the movie, if you don't want to transmit the movie to an audience, then you better not buy it. So you see it, you like it, you go for it.
Okay, so it's not as calculated. It's not running every number, but you have to love it too.
Yeah.
Well, there is a pattern. They work on British cinema, and as discussed, they always look for filmmakers that they can try to be loyal to, because Andrea Arnold has become a brand. It's an Andrea Arnold film.
Yeah.
When Stefan buys a Georgia Oakley film, it's a debut, but the work they're going to do is about making it a Georgia Oakley film, and whatever she does next, I suppose that Stefan will be very keen to see if that's something that they can continue to work with. Yeah. And her work will be recognized as such with the press and the critics, and so there's a continuity in the work that you do with filmmakers. And so it's more work to work on the debut, because you have to build that audience in the first place. But that's the beauty of their job, of what we do, and with impact and with marketing and with sales, is whenever there's a new directorial voice, it's about how do we get that filmmaker, that production team to be recognized as something new and exciting. And it's beautiful. It's like a first kiss. There's always, it's always, there's only a first. And it's a very specific type of work. And sometimes there's beautiful distribution companies like Lucky Red that might say, I'm not going to buy the first movie because there's a lot of heavy lifting involved. I'll buy the next one when the director will be more established or will have had a little bit more clout, which is the natural kind of pecking order in any country, where some distributors are very good at launching and building new directorial voices. And then there's larger distributors who have just a big engine and they need a little bit more, meat on the bone to get involved on a project.
How did Blue Jean do in the Benelux?
It was not great, but I mean we were very happy because it's I mean when we picked it up we knew exactly what it could do, and in the end it did what it did. We had support at least in one territory from the UK support, which helps of course. So in the end it's of course the figures are important, but it's also you place a new author and a movie in theaters and on platforms after, and that's also part of the job actually. So it's not only restricted to the number of admission or box office you do.
Yeah. And am I right that Cineart has a new deal with Mubi or an investment from Mubi?
We do.
Has that changed at all how you look at UK films?
Not really, because so far we haven't been involved with the UK films via Mubi.
Okay.
And it's more, it's just bigger than just the UK films. But of course, we'll be very close to them.
Okay. And Stefano, when would you maybe take a chance on a first feature, or even from the UK or from outside the UK? When would that be the right thing? Does it need an acting talent? Does it need a hook?
You're talking about pre-buy or finished film?
Finished film, I think.
Finished film, as I said. If
you love it.
if we love it, yes. Because, it's difficult out there. You need to have the hooks. And nowadays, every choice the audience makes is very calculated. To leave your house, call the babysitter, organize yourself, transportation, parking, expense is a choice that is made with a very precise calculation. It's not any longer, we're going to the cinema, we're going to see a film. That has changed. So you need the hooks, which with a new director are not the name of the director.
Yeah. It has to be
Maybe the cast can, but predominantly is the story.
Okay.
Who does the story speak to? How do the audience connect? And we've seen more and more that the story is the most relevant element of the game. American films that have these, we call them packages, these big actors. I mean, people expect to see them on a platform nowadays.
Yeah. Sarah, can I ask? Oh, Stefan. No.
Not to mention reviews, of course.
Reviews help, yes. Or are very important for a smaller film, aren't they? Yeah. Sarah, can I ask you about In Camera? Because this is a very interesting debut. It had its world premiere at Carlo Vivari. Not an easy film to even describe, or how did you?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very interesting film. It's very well made. So how did that perform internationally? How did people respond to that debut?
Yeah, so In Camera, for those who haven't seen it, is Nakash Kali's debut feature, premiered at Carlo Vivari. It was selected for the Great 8 showcase with Cannes Food, the UK arm, last year, and it's co-financed by BBC Films and BFI. So the press out of Carlo Vivari last year was outstanding, really incredible reviews for it. It's a very interesting look on representation in the film industry in the UK through a satirical, sort of dramatic lens, starring Naban Rizwan, Amira Masri in lead parts. And it's a really interesting debut because it's not kind of a typical kind of 3-act structure for this project.
And it's not Ken Loach.
And it's not Ken Loach.
Following in the footsteps.
Yeah, it's not kind of from an impact lens. It's not sort of like a Ken Loach kind of style around Giannario sound. It's very much more experimenting with form. So it had incredible reviews at Carlo Vivari, a really amazing festival run, won prizes at Thessaloniki, was at Zurich, at London. But it is a much more difficult sell than some of the more other kind of UK projects. So we have started to make some deals, which is great. So a few territories have come on board, which is lovely. Would love more people on the panel. Would be nice. That would be great. And the UK Theatre is going to kick off this summer. So that's going to give a kind of a bigger uplift to it. And Amir's just been announced in a new project with Pierce Brosnan. So his star is rising. He had it in a project in Cannes last year. And the UK Theatre is going to be this summer with Conic, who are an amazing UK distributor. Their latest title grossed over 300k for an indie, which is fantastic. So we'll have sort of new artwork and trailers and everything launching very imminently around there. So we're hoping that'll give it a little uplift. And it got 2 BIFA nominations last season, which was incredible for the performances in the film. So
But
it's
even
not-
with all that, is it kind of hard to cut through the noise with a film?
even with all that, yeah, it's still not the kind of easiest sell. Because I think it is experimenting with form, it's experimenting with kind of performance, and the issue is extremely important. But it is that risk on that new voice that I think kind of is the thing that we're kind of hearing from the market. But we've had the first kind of couple of territories now come in. Non-stop are going to be releasing in the Scandinavian market. We've got Spanish and a few others coming in already. So we're hoping it's kind of it's a slower burn because it premiered at Carnival last year. But we may see some pickup kind of later on as it kind of builds over the summer. So it's on its way, a lovely little kind of British film. But we are, proud of where it's going so far. But anyone else who'd like to buy it, I'd love to talk to you. That would be great.
Okay,
Please come.
Good. Fabian, can you charge more for a British film partly because of English language?
That's a good question.
Compared to maybe a smaller language title from a different territory?
No, I wouldn't phrase it that way. I think how we value a film and its export value is usually linked to director, subject matter, who is it for? Do we perceive a clear targeted audience, or is it like, let's hope the filmmaker makes a great film and that the press likes it, and that's the. It really depends how clear that target market is, and that applies to any film that we analyze and for acquisition. Now, to the question of ease of acquisition, the English language will facilitate transactions and acquisition impulse in a stronger way than any other language. So I don't think it has an impact on price point, but it has an impact on the willingness of people to acquire it or not.
Is it, as also for our distributors here, is it ever a drawback that we share a language with Hollywood? Is it ever that, it just, to me, it doesn't always seem that either somebody's going to see a Marvel film or they're going to see Blue Jean. It doesn't really matter that they're both in the English language. But is there ever a point that it's seen as like English language are sort of cannibalizing each other? Does that make any sense?
To be honest, I think both types of films are so different that I think cannibalism is very complicated in that case, because if you take Andre Arnold or even Ken Loach, Mike Leigh, and you compare it to the Masters of the Universe or whatever, those big budget films, it's totally different countries.
Yeah. Okay.
There is one thing. These films that Stefan was mentioning work. American films, similar American films, don't work.
Okay. So
the American indie,
yeah.
What used to be the Sundance
yes.
titles from the
they
90s.
never worked. They never work. So let's say the American, they don't do many, but let's call them social films.
Yeah.
Okay, can we brand them this way? Those don't work.
Yeah.
Now, the reason, I don't know. Maybe because being European, the topics are always, social state, how do you call it? Being out of work, having struggling into society, all these topics that are then do wonderfully, that Ken Loach has done wonderfully, and that are the topic of many European films, many arthouse films have these kind of topics. When it comes from America, sort of, I cannot even think of many that have it. So it's the other way around, which is then of course there is the more glossy, the Britishness of that is also a very good selling point. Not going to Harry Potter, but the other film.
The mid-level.
I think, for example, Mother in Sunday was an independent film. It has this look, but at the same time, it had some substance in terms of storytelling and the look. It was a very interesting film.
Sarah.
Just to follow on from what's said there, we pass on a lot of projects from America from an issue basis, because it's like the issue of sort of like the healthcare industry in America is so specific to the terribleness of the US healthcare system. And when you look at like how it translates, it's really hard for people to relate to like that being the struggle, because it's like we all have healthcare available to us. It's like it's a kind of complex, like you have some breakout like series on that issue, like Dope Sick and others about the pharmaceutical industry. It's doing really well. But we actually pass on a lot of US projects that come to us because we're like outside the US, this struggle is not the struggle, and it's like really different and it's hard to translate it. So it's an interesting point because like the UK or the European version of a similar lane, it can travel quite well, but some people look at the US version and they're like, it doesn't really work here, it doesn't resonate as clearly, and it's hard to get. We take a lot of our marketing support from NGO and charity partners and brand partners around the world, and it's hard to get them to sort of like back that or endorse it outside of the American market. So that becomes a struggle. Or in contrast to that, there may be a US agent who's got the North American rights and they're looking for rest of world. And I'm like, well, if I can't have the US rights, then that's going to be really less incentive for me, because that's where this is going to sell well. If it's going to sell well anywhere, it's going to be in your domestic market.
Yeah, and I think on top of the fact that before Brexit, all the UK productions were supported, to media also made a difference, you know, because, I mean, as an independent distributor, you would take a risk, but then knowing that you might have support for your P&A cost, and then afterwards generate automatic support to buy another European film. So I think that also helps European film at that time.
Yeah. I can't believe you said the B word in front of us. It's okay. No, I was just going to bring this up because after the B event, we are not part of, the UK cannot be part of Creative Europe Media, or is not a part of Creative Europe Media.
They could.
Yes, I know. That's why I corrected myself. It's a financial consideration, I think. I won't speak for those people who decide that. But we do have the UK Global Screen Fund, which has some P&A funding available. I think from what I know, it's not, you know, if you buy a Norwegian film, you automatically get this pot of money to help distribute that film in your country. It's not quite as simple as that in the UK. Can everybody talk about your experience with the Global Screen Fund's P&A pot of money and when it works really well, or is it still not as easy to use?
It was launched, 2 years ago, I think so. So having something is always better than having nothing. So let's start
positive.
There.
Yes.
No, the fact is it's quite new. It's not always transparent because we don't know exactly how the projects are decided upon and funded. Strangely enough, talking about Blue Jean, the release in Belgium was supported, not in the Netherlands. Why? I don't know.
Because you distribute in both countries?
Because we are a distributor in the Netherlands.
And you applied for both?
Belgium, and we applied for both.
And did not get both?
And we didn't get both.
Okay.
Okay. So we never, once again...
You don't really know why.
Better something than nothing.
Yeah.
So, and at this stage, we heard that the money was spent, so it's not always clear where it is, or the projects are selected, on which base. So it's a bit like, you know, trying to fish something and then hoping that there will be something coming out of water at some time, but you never know when.
Okay. Sarah, have you...
Yeah, so I also should say I'm a grantee of the Global Screen Fund. So they funded us, thank you very much, to set up our sales arm last year. So I'm very grateful to that fund. It was a really great investment and enabled us to hire our full-time sales and acquisitions manager. So thank you, BFI. On the P&A fund, because we do a lot of documentary content, one of the guidelines is around sort of multi-territory offers. And for docs, sometimes it's hard to get those multi-territory deals in place at the same time when you're applying. So I think being able to do it on like a case-by-case, territory by territory basis would be useful, especially for the documentary market, because in some cases you've got all deals kind of happening at the same time. In other bases you're doing them sort of iteratively over a number of months, but you have to apply with multiple deals already inked before you can kind of get it. So
who applies? Does it have to be a UK based?
Yeah, the UK company applies on behalf.
Would that be the UK sales company or the UK producer?
Yeah, UK sales agency usually.
Okay.
Right. We apply for the backing of the sales company. We apply for us, which is a business development grant.
That's
and
a different
P&A
kind
grant
of
is
pot.
different.
Yeah. And Stefano, have you used it?
Also the producer can apply because we applied for Ken Loach. They were sold by a French company, Goodfellas. Yes, as Stefan was mentioning, is better than nothing. And so it's always comes in handy. The important thing for us is particularly true is that is not the incentive to buy the movie. So we don't buy the movie because there is the fund, and it can be not only the British fund, the Germans, even
Yeah.
Italians have the same system of fund. But we buy the movie because it has a commercial perspective and potential, and then this helps because it reduces the risk. Which, of course, when you're dealing with non-big stars, non-American films, is always there. It's trickier to be successful with, let's say, sorry? With nobody. With less. No, of course, it has a different kind of hooks. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
So it comes in. I have to say that our experience has always been fine. No smooth. Yes, the timing is what it is, but we have to be honest. The timing of the European funds is not very efficient as well. I mean, it's quite long.
Yeah, Fabian, would it help you if this funding, are a lot of buyers asking you about that funding?
Yeah,
or-
look, as I said, it's better to have something than nothing. And to put it simply, the BFI has to do more with less money.
Yeah.
And so when you have less to spend, you're trying to be very targeted with it. And they have recognized that building audiences for British films independently was important. And who's building audiences are our distributors. And giving them a nugget of money to alleviate the risk on the P&A expenditure on British independent film was a good way of promoting British cinema. Ideally, and building an audience, building a directorial brand, building an independent industry takes years. So ideally, rather than being hand to mouth on a project by project basis, you want to try to create a circular type of investment, and which is money that's invested, if films are successful, can be reinvested, and there's where you have like a incremental effect on the original investment, which is not the case at the moment. That is very much the case of the European system. If Lucky Red and Cineart release any European film, and that film is successful at the box office, that generates a ticker and generates an automatic funding system that they can tap into to buy another European film. So success feeds success. And that is at the moment what we don't have with the UK, which is more like project by project. So it's great because if you're an American independent filmmaker, you don't have any of that. So they have rich uncles.
Fabian, can I stick with you? Because you must get thousands or many hundreds of British film scripts, ideas, packages come across your desk. What stands out to you that will be right for Film Constellation to come on board?
Yeah, one of our role is to try to pick the best of what is coming across our desk so that we can make that pre-selection for them and that they can then access, the tip of the iceberg of what's coming out of in terms of independent British production. It's what stands out is two things, or it's a film that will have a clear defined market, and that can be, for example, its genre, and independent, a well-made independent genre film will have a preloaded market internationally, because in every territory there are genre specialists and there is an audience that is captive and that has proven very resilient when it comes to theatrical performance. And there's a proliferation of streaming services as well that are specifically looking for genre content. So Constellation has, with the support of the BFI, has just announced the launch of a new talent lab called UK New Wave Talent Lab, which
This is
will
super cool.
which will
Congrats.
enable to
Yeah.
basically go and find the next, original new genre voices coming out of the UK. And why we're doing that is because we think that's a vector of growth for UK talent that has preloaded marketability internationally. So ideally, you're making a film that you feel can travel because of its genre. Another criteria might be, here's a filmmaker that has had a great project with a short film that won multiple awards. So we feel that that directorial voice already has distinguished itself. And so that's something where we feel we can be a good ambassador for that filmmaker to come to, make their debut. And then there is the kind of like snowball effect where those projects, get supported by the BFI or by Film 4, by BBC, and then there is this kind of like holy trinity in the UK. If you get that support, those films will then come to the fore and have more visibility. So that's in terms of something that is not IP-led, but it's like talent, director-led. And then the classic idea of what we call a package, and it's he's a filmmaker that with great IP based on a best-selling book, and the producers have assembled an exciting acting talent that is known internationally and will prove marketable and will potentially trigger interest all the way to studio interest in North America. So for us, for Constellation, it's a mix of three things. It's crossover potential talent where we feel that with the script and with that level of actors involved, there might be a studio sale down the line where we can really elevate, that filmmaker to a higher category. And a recent example you mentioned was the Lesson, which was, a British independent film with it was a debut screenwriter and not a debut filmmaker. Alice Troughton is a very experienced TV director, but it was a first feature debut. And here with Camille Gatin, who had developed the script in the UK, we saw the opportunity of having an independently made film that could appeal to US studios. And we couldn't get it made out of the UK, candidly speaking. So we looked at Europe and we shot it in Germany, and where there is strong incentives and regional incentives. And so we shot it in the Hamburg region, and then we set it up with Focus Features internationally and Bleecker Street in North America. So here was interesting. It was a British IP, British writer, British director, British cast, funded by German money and US studios.
Did they come on because of Richard E. Grant, or
Who they?
all of them?
The studios?
Yeah.
Well, it was a really good story and an exciting filmmaker, and our role was very much to convince them about Alice being a talented filmmaker that was TV experienced, that she would make a striking directorial debut. And the subject matter, it was a film about class and about, set in the world of high British aristocracy. And, we know that Americans are obsessed with royalty and class because it's something that doesn't really exist in there. So, there's that knowledge as well of what are the themes that might interest our clients. And that's the packaging exercise where we work closely with producers and with filmmakers, understanding where that project might sit in the marketplace and help them navigate the caliber. What's the budget that the market can sustain? What's the talent that you might be able to access? Everybody would love to work with Jennifer Lawrence, but it's pointless to chase that. It's looking at understanding what your reach is, and that's really what our role is. With Sarah and I, as being a counterpart to producers, to enable to caliber the project in the right way and see where it would fit in the marketplace, and then knowing what you like, and then knowing that through the network that we have built, understanding that there is a number of distributors that would equally be excited by that filmmaker or by that subject matter. So it's not a precise science.
No, thank you for
there's no AI for it yet.
No, we don't want an AI for it. I thought I would open it up to see if anybody in the audience has some questions for our panelists. We'll see if... Do we have a mic? Oh, you've got the mic. Look,
I have a mic.
right there.
Hi, I'm James. I have brown Luke Skywalker hair. I'm wondering about your perception of the market value of animation, particularly adult animation, some would say art house animation, and if you can speak to that.
Good question. Thanks. Yeah.
So, animation, yes, of course. The good news is that once upon a time it was just Hollywood, and it's not anymore. It's many years now that there is space. There is a lot of animation coming from all over. In particular, Italy is a bit tricky for adult animation. I think that for the first time in many, many years, we've seen this year with The Boy and the Heron by Hayao Miyazaki, finally the cinemas understanding that an animated film can be shown also at 8:00 p.m. and not necessarily at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's always a challenge when you're not talking to the kids because they still have this perception. But if the film is really good, it will find its space. not easy, not easy. The festivals, play a very substantial role, but it's curious that in 20 years in Cannes in competition there has been one animation, and this year is the second one. 20 years, 2 films. So 20 years ago it was Waltz with Bashir. This year is The Most Precious Cargoes by Hazanavicius. So also that would help more if more animated films would cross from specialized festivals or selections to a more mainstream window, which is the main competition. Same goes for Venice, of course, and Berlin and all the others. So there is a lot available, but again, it always comes down to the economics, to the ability you have then to bring it to a large audience and exploit all the rights all down the line.
What about in Benelux? How does animation for adults do?
It's very complicated. What you mentioned was Miyazaki, who was, I think, in competition with another film of his in...
It was in Venice.
It was in Venice.
In Venice.
Yes. No, it's a very interesting case, that one, because I think, and we mentioned it before, that platform elevated a little bit the taste and the appetite for better films. And I think Miyazaki has been discovered mainly on Netflix through a new...
Totally agree.
Yes.
Because we experienced it and we went from 10 to 100 in terms of the result of his last film compared
From the cinephiles who knew him up to
Exactly,
more
yeah.
mainstream.
Yes.
And I know it's very bizarre for an independent distributor to say, well, platforms, but I really think that they made sure that the taste of the viewers are really going into the good direction. And the fantastic results you see with films like Miyazaki, but not only Perfect Days, Ken Loach, Zone of Interest are amazing. And I think it's because they learned the lesson through the platforms. So my hope is that adult animation will be following that trend, but it's super tricky because Miyazaki is a master now. Hazanavicius, okay, he's done film, he's done The Artist, but it's his first animation film. So we'll see how it will translate into admissions in the Benelux, in Italy, and all over the world. But it's still very tricky. Also because TV are not really interested in buying, at least in the Benelux, animation film, especially for adults, because you still have that idea that what's animated is a family film.
Yeah, let's change that attitude. And we have time for one more question if somebody has one. Oh, yeah. Oh, do you have the mic back there? Yeah.
Hello, and thank you for this fabulous information. What elements for you make the perfect pitch for a film to get made?
Sarah, or Stefan.
Well, I'll do it from the documentary side because that's more of my background and was previous a documentary fund, and from an impact lens. So I have a very specific kind of remit that I'm looking at. So we're looking at not just what your story is, but how it's going to resonate with an audience. And I think what most pitches miss, like just completely avoid, and it's never in there, is who is the audience you're making this for and why is it going to resonate with them? And every time I'll ask a film, like, okay, who's the intended audience? They'll re-pitch me the film. And I'm like, no, like, who is this for? And my number one phrase that I hate, the film's for everyone. No, it's never for everyone. Like, stop saying that. You can have a film that crosses over to multiple different audience segments. Like, there are definitely films that cross over in amazing ways. But when you're pitching and you just say over and over, it's for everyone, it's truly universal, it's extremely universal, that's actually a real negative to hear as a buyer perspective. Because I want to say, like, who am I actually going to sell this to? Who's this going to go to? And when you're constantly, as a producer, pitching it like it's for everyone, it's universal, it's there, it's never the case. So, like, remove that from your vocabulary. And then from our perspective, what I'm looking at is like the currency of that issue in the current time. So I get pitched a climate change film probably every 2 days. And climate change is really bad. And we need climate stories. But following an activist at a protest I've seen that film 100 times. So it's like, what is the nuance of that story that is giving me new understanding to that issue? It's like, okay, this is the film that's actually pushing it in this direction. Because people coming to me saying like, it's about climate change, it's really important. I'm like, I agree. But like, how is your film different? How is it unique? Again, unique is a horrible word to have in a pitch because every film is unique. But from my perspective, I'm analyzing films on their issue like merits. And so just saying it's climate, I need like, what's the story arc? What's the character? How is it going to be compelling to kind of come through? So I would say for most producers, it's real clarity of like what your story is, real clarity of the direction of the film, but having an eyesight to like what is your audience targets and how are they going to resonate with it, and what makes your film current right now. Because the easiest thing we can all say is, oh, can you come back in 6 months? When you've got a little bit more. But if you can reinforce like, hey, this is happening right now, or I've got so many films pitching us right now because the elections are happening all around the world. Half the world is having an election this year, fun fact. So we've got loads of projects like the US elections are coming up. Can we get an impact campaign happening tomorrow? Because they want to hit a release date before the election because of potentially Trump coming back in. So when you can create the urgency of the narrative being important today, that's very compelling and is a compelling reason for buyers to get on board in that particular moment. So I would advocate for everyone in your pitch decks to have a slide around audience intention, analyzing your audience market, and any data. I'm a data geek, as anyone who knows me will stress. I love a spreadsheet. But any data-informed analysis. So we have a film called Your Fat Friend, which premiered at Tribeca last year. We picked it up for Rest of World after a few months from that festival. And the film is about a podcast and #1 best-selling author in the US and a podcast presenter. And we're using the podcast data to talk to buyers about like exactly how many people in that territory are viewing all the social media analytics. That should be a standard for everyone now. If you have social media, look at the analytics. Who are the people actually interested in the film? What's the demos on the back end? You can see, is it women like 25 to 40? You can pull that all from the back end of social. And then what are the metrics that can suggest that that kind of theme is of interest in that territory? So we're literally going in with like podcast analytics and social media analytics in certain territories to be like, this is why you should buy it in that territory. And then fun fact on that one, where some of the distributors maybe were like, oh, I'm not quite sure, too risk averse. We've been doing direct distribution experiments and making 6 figures in those territories in like small amounts of time. So we're like, well, you missed out there, didn't you? Yeah. And we'll take it ourselves. I'd love it if the distributors buy it in that's better for me. But we're doing our direct distribution in those territories where we knew there was a market, and there's 6-figure plus markets kind of coming out that we're just getting it directly, which is great for our producers. So happy with that.
That was like a 3-minute pitching masterclass.
Sorry.
Thank you. Brilliant. We have to wrap up because some of our panels has some busy, probably going to buy and sell films. That's what they do all day. I want to thank you for the good fight you do in the name of cinema and good films and British cinema, and thank you all for telling us a bit more insight about how you do that. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for being a great audience.